Good afternoon. I am Matt Graves, United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. I am joined on the stage today by FBI Special Agent in charge of the FBI Washington Field Office's Criminal and Cyber Division, David Scott, and ATF Special Agent and Group Supervisor Bernard Mensa. Last year, in June 2023, we had 140 carjackings in that month alone. In June of this year, we had 31 carjackings. That is over 100 fewer carjackings in the month of June alone, when comparing this year to last year. I want to take a few minutes to talk about carjacking trends that led up to last June, what the agencies on this stage in the Metropolitan Police Department have done to reverse those trends, and what we are collectively doing to continue to combat carjackings. In 2018, MPD began to report carjackings as a standalone number separate from robbery. The annual number of carjackings was roughly the same in 2018 and 2019, but began increasing dramatically in 2020. When I became a United States Attorney for the District of Columbia at the end of 2021, the dramatic increase in carjackings and homicides were by far the most concerning trend line that I saw in the violent crime landscape. While law enforcement activities alone cannot control these trend lines, they can influence them. My tenure has been devoted to doing everything we can to reverse these trend lines. In 2022, shortly after assuming the role, I began coordinating closely with our local and federal law enforcement partners to develop plans for how we could maximize our impact on shootings and carjackings. I have talked at previous press conferences about our efforts to reduce shootings, our Project Safe Neighborhood initiative, and our proactive targeting of the crews that are driving violence in our neighborhoods. As of this morning, overall violent crime is down 30% year over year. Homicides are down 27%. With respect to carjackings, an important step in the process was the Metropolitan Police Department in 2021 announcing a carjacking task force, a team of detectives focused exclusively on carjackings and related crimes. Since its formation, each of the organizations represented on the stage today have contributed law enforcement agents to the carjacking task force. As we continue to see the number of carjackings grow in 2022, a few overarching issues were clear. One, the surge was being fueled by juveniles, and of the adults, many were under the age of 25. Two, in many carjackings, there appeared to be no greater purpose than joyriding. In fact, cars were often found quickly abandoned not far from where they were carjacked. Three, while fewer in number, there were some carjackings where the cars were taken with an eye towards selling them or using them to commit another crime. And four, it seemed to be that a relatively small group of individuals was really driving this trend. We also knew that it could be hard to close carjackings using eyewitnesses. The quick and traumatic nature of the offense, coupled with the steps that perpetrators take to conceal their identities, can make it difficult to get actionable descriptions from the victims. Against this backdrop, the organizations represented on the stage asked, collectively and individually, how can we innovate what we're doing in a way that can reverse this multi-year trend? Throughout late 2022 and into 2023, this group tried a number of new approaches, including undercover operations, conducting digital forensic analyses more routinely used in white-collar cases, and identifying additional ways to work backwards when people are found driving a carjacked vehicle days after it was carjacked to determine whether they were the carjacker or whether they know the person who carjacked the vehicle. I have often said that this work, while impactful, can take time, and have pointed to a crime surge that we had in the district in 2008 that it took 4 years to reverse. Unfortunately, as we were in the midst of deploying these investigative strategies in 2023, the number of carjackings continued to rise. But as arrests from these investigations started to flow in the second half of 2023, we saw the number of carjackings begin to decrease. We prepared information about some of our office's prosecutions in this area over the course of the last year alone. Included in these prosecutions are a federal indictment charging a single crew with orchestrating 33 carjackings, including one resulting in death and another in which the victim was shot but survived. Several federal cases where defendants are charged with carjackings and a number of other crimes of violence. Multiple federal convictions that resulted in sentences of 10 years or more, multiple trial convictions in Superior Court, and lengthy sentences for carjacking convictions in Superior Court. I want to be clear, no one is saying that we had 78% fewer carjackings in June 2024 than we did in June 2023 just because of these law enforcement actions. To the contrary, reversals this stark require outstanding work from a host of entities within and outside of the criminal justice ecosystem. It is our view, though, that prosecutions like these that take carjackers off the street for many years are the best way we as law enforcement can influence these trends. At a press conference in December 2023, when we announced one of these significant carjacking actions, I noted a couple of points that I want to repeat today. First, anyone telling our youth that carjacking is not a big deal and that carjacked vehicles are free cars are lying to them. Our office's prosecutions from the last year alone establishing that carjacking doesn't give you a free car, it gives you a fast pass to jail. Those considering committing a carjacking should expect to receive a lengthy sentence like these defendants did. Second, I previously noted a supermajority of individuals arrested for carjacking are juveniles, and that I've instructed our career supervisors to strongly consider prosecuting 16 and 17-year-olds as adults when they are involved in a series of armed carjackings, because these are not the impetuous crimes of a juvenile who temporarily lost control. They are instead the calculated crime of someone who is willing to point a gun at a person's face for money or for property. In the prosecutions we highlight today, there are 11 juveniles charged in Superior Court as adults for armed carjackings, and there are more juveniles charged as adults for armed carjackings than just these 11. We will continue to prosecute 16 and 17-year-olds who engage in similar conduct as adults. None of us on the stage came to our roles wanting to prosecute juveniles as adults. But given what we saw in the last couple of years, if we want to continue to reverse the carjacking trend, we have to prosecute as adults the juveniles who are turbocharging it. Prosecuting juveniles who engage in pattern or spree armed carjackings takes the relatively limited number of our juveniles engaged in such conduct off the streets and sends a strong message of deterrence to other juveniles that they do not want to go down this path. Finally, none of us are satisfied with where we are. One carjacking is one too many. It is a traumatic and dangerous crime. The dramatic reduction in the number of carjackings we saw last June versus this June, though, shows that while we have not reached our destination, we are on the right path. Our office and our law enforcement partners will do everything we can to hold carjackers accountable and further drive down the numbers of carjackings in the district. We are incredibly grateful to MPD, ATF, the FBI, and our own criminal investigators. They have not just worked tirelessly on these investigations, but they have been innovative in their work, identifying creative ways of building rock-solid cases in carjackings that, at first blush, may have appeared unsolvable. I'd also like to thank our career prosecutors who work these investigations alongside law enforcement day and night. They are truly all-hands-on-deck efforts. Our prosecutors do not just issue subpoenas and help to secure warrants. They're also working side by side with law enforcement, reviewing and analyzing the evidence. We would not see the results we have seen over the course of the last year without their hard work. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Special Agent in Charge, Scott.
Good afternoon. Thank you, U.S. Attorney Graves. I'm Dave Scott, Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Washington Field Office Criminal and Cyber Division. I'm grateful to be here today alongside of our partners to discuss our work to combat carjackings in Washington, D.C. As U.S. Attorney Graves said, the number of carjackings reported in the district increased from 2021 to 2022 and then again from 2022 to 2023. These carjackers did not discriminate when choosing victims. They targeted men and women, young and old, in every ward at all times of day and night. These victims may not have had much in common, but many of the incidents bore similarities that informed our investigations. Data from the carjackings indicated that a small number of people, many of whom were in their teens and 20s, were responsible for a significant number of the carjackings in and around the city. And they were not only committing carjackings, they were also committing armed robberies, shootings, arson, and murder. Take Sade Hardy and his co-conspirators as an example. Between December 2022 and June 2023, Hardy allegedly committed 33 armed carjackings in D.C. and Maryland, some of which he committed by himself and others he committed with his indicted co-conspirators, Keontae Rice, Landrell Jordan III, and Malik Norman. The victims included a food delivery driver making his last stop for the evening, an elderly couple pulling into their driveway, and a mother buckling her children into her vehicle outside an elementary school. On Christmas Day 2022, the defendants tried to carjack a mother and her young son in front of their home. And on Valentine's Day 2023, they targeted a 90-year-old victim whose late wife's ashes were taken during the carjacking. In April 2024, a federal grand jury returned a 76-count indictment against Hardy and his co-conspirators, charging them for their roles in multiple carjackings. The indictment included charges against Hardy for an attempted carjacking during which Hardy allegedly shot a rideshare driver, as well as charges against Hardy and Rice for an attempted carjacking during which a local mechanic was shot and killed. Another ring we've targeted is allegedly responsible for at least 3 carjackings and 9 armed robberies this year. In March 2024, a federal grand jury returned a 14-count indictment against members of this ring, Kennard Bishop, Khalil Boyd, and Edward Brown. During these carjackings, the victims were held at gunpoint and robbed of their belongings. The defendants then allegedly used these stolen vehicles to commit armed robberies throughout D.C. and Maryland. These are just 2 examples of carjacking rings we've investigated. We've also pursued individuals who have gone on violent sprees. Take Ruben Bordeaux, for example. On November 13, 2023, he allegedly committed an armed carjacking of an Amtrak truck driver, and then the next morning attempted to carjack an Amazon delivery driver with a co-conspirator. The victim tried to flee, and in response, Bordeaux shot at the victim in broad daylight in the middle of a residential community. Then Bordeaux fled, hitting multiple vehicles in an attempt to escape. When law enforcement officers arrested him, they found the keys to another carjacked vehicle in his pocket. In February 2024, a federal grand jury returned a 10-count indictment against Bordeaux for his alleged role in the armed carjackings and Hobbs Act robberies of commercial vehicles. We're often asked what subjects do with vehicles after carjackings. Some of the carjacking vehicles are abandoned, some are sold. Others are used to facilitate other crimes, as in the case of Dayon Ross. Back in July 2023, Ross was involved in a deadly carjacking spree. Within about 30 minutes, he carjacked multiple vehicles while armed with a stolen handgun. After fleeing from a carjacked vehicle that he had crashed, Ross entered a McDonald's parking lot, approached an off-duty Metro bus driver who was sitting in his vehicle at the drive-thru, and shot him to death. Moments later, Ross stole a vehicle from a mother who was sitting in her vehicle with her daughter and 3 dogs and shot at least one of the dogs. During one of his additional attempts to flee, Ross crashed into law enforcement officers who were pursuing him. He opened fire on the officers before ultimately surrendering. In July 2023, a federal grand jury returned a 6-count indictment against Ross. So how do we focus on combating the scourge of carjackings? We've re-upped our work with our federal, state, and local partners, pooling resources, sharing intelligence, and reviewing digital evidence to target drivers of violence. FBI agents are embedded in the Metropolitan Police Department's Carjacking Task Force and Violent Crime Impact Team. MPD detectives, along with other federal and local law enforcement officers, are embedded in the WFO's Violent Crimes Task Force. We also work closely with our partners across jurisdictions, including the Montgomery County Police Department, Prince George's County Police Department, Hyattsville Police Department, and Tacoma Park Police Department to help link subjects who commit violent crimes in D.C. and neighboring counties and to dismantle those groups. Additionally, the Gun Violence Analytics Cell, a newly formed group, is working to use data analytics to better understand the drivers of violent crime in the city. As U.S. Attorney Graves mentioned, the reduction in carjackings this year is encouraging. We ask community members to remain vigilant, report carjackings and attempted carjackings and suspicious activity to law enforcement so the FBI and our other partners here today can continue to do our part to maintain this downward trend. Thank you.